Hey guys, Brent Hull talking about cabinetry today, historic cabinetry. When did it show up? When did it start? Come join me. We're going through my book, okay? This is a book, Historic Millwork, just out last month. If you would like to get it on Amazon, you can. If you want to order it from our shop, info@brenthull.com, you can get it there. I'll actually sign it and endorse it for you if you'd like. So there's a number of chapters in this book, but we're going to talk about cabinetry today. Now, you still, as I broke up the book into a pre-industrial and post-industrial, which is usually separated around 1850, 1860, after the Civil War, really things begin to explode and change. But this is kind of the marking point of when that industrial design changes and becomes machine-made instead of handmade. So we're dealing with an early handmade era here before that time. Now, realize that in the pattern books, whether it be Abraham Swan, Beatty Langley, William Payne, Asher Benjamin, I don't care who it is before 1850, even when you get into Bernard Lefevre and things like that, 1820s, 1830s, there really wasn't cabinetry. Now, there were built-ins, okay, there was niches, there was bookcases, which came a little bit later, but the idea of building cabinetry like we have today just really wasn't around. So if you go to Winter Tour, there's tons of corner cabinets, there's tons of china cabinets, okay? Open bookcases. The thing that started the whole collecting thing for William DuPont was a china hutch that basically had these plate rails with all these plates displayed on it. That's what cabinetry was. Now, why? Well, there's not 50 spoons, ice cream bowls. There's not cereal bowls, right? You just don't, that's not the way we eat. That's not the way things are produced. There's a big deal at Winter Tour. They have the original china that George Washington used, okay? Well, and it came from China. The reason it's called China, because it came from China. You're looking at an era where in that pre-industrial era, we just didn't have as much stuff. Okay, and you go watch the George Carlin thing on stuff.
So you know how important that is. That's the whole meaning of life, isn't it? Trying to find a place for your stuff.
The big thing that happens post-industrial, okay, is you begin to, as we build houses at bigger scale, as we begin to have more stuff, we need things to collect our stuff. We need things that will hold our stuff. And so you see this explosion again, 1860, 1870, all the way through into the 1950s. Now, my book kind of stops around 1940, 1950. Why is that? Coming back from the Second World War, everything changes in home building. Go watch my video on 20 years that changed home building, and it'll talk about from 1926, 1946, the change that took place and houses change and everything changes. Now, the thing that's fascinating to me is that plywood, which makes up all of our cabinets today, if for the most part, really, the very first patent was in 1865, right? That's in a post-industrial era. What are they doing? They actually have a saw that can cut thin veneers, okay? And these thin veneers would then be laid up a couple different ways. That's early 1865, and that's in England. We don't have the first 4x8 sheet of plywood until 1928. Do you know that? Not till 1928 do you have a sheet of plywood in 4x8 sides. Now, you see plywood used in furniture in this post-industrial era because they were bending plywood, they were using plywood. You really don't see it in construction, certainly the construction of carcasses. And so if you have a house from the 1920s, 1930s, most likely you don't have plywood in your kitchen cabinets. By the 1940s, 1950s, you start to have plywood. So that's really kind of the turning point. Realize too, that the modular kitchen cabinet, okay, now modular kitchen cabinet, meaning you can buy a 2-foot section and a 1-foot section and a 3-foot section, right? You can buy these modular sizes to fill out your kitchen. Well, that doesn't even happen until the 1920s, 1930s. So we're bumping up against the end of my period by 1950. And so plywood ends up being a big reason why cabinets aren't built in mass production, because it took so much wood. Now, look at this. You've seen my video, maybe you've seen my video on salesman sample. I believe this was also a salesman sample. And if you look at the way that it was constructed, right, you see the top here, all in oak. It's just planks of wood. This isn't even plywood. So what you have is these little doors, okay? Isn't this cute? These little doors open up to this area in the back. Notice what they've done in the back of the cabinet. They haven't put plywood back there. That's tongue and groove boards. We'll come back to that. But you basically got all these cabinets being built, and this sample is a good example of it. This is made in oak. This is probably 1880s, 1890s as a sample, because industrialization allowed us to make use of hardwoods. And so they're showing off a hardwood cabinet. But the beading on the side, right, is pretty typical Victorian. This kind of hardware, typical in the 1880s, 1890s. I've got a sample of the way cabinets are produced. Realize too that kitchens really aren't kitchens like we know them today until you get into the 70s or 80s, okay? Why is that? Well, it was a servants area. So in 1920, there was I've covered it before, but they basically, the Hoosier Cabinet Company did a contest to see who could design the best kitchen. Fascinatingly, okay, kitchens were considered a workspace, okay? So a typical kitchen might be 10 by 12, okay? And the things that won, okay, usually there's a sink under a window, okay? And there might be one wall of cabinets, okay? So the kitchen is a workspace, okay? It's not the show-off space. It's not where everybody hangs out. This is where work was supposed to happen. And because work was hard, they wanted as few steps as possible, so kitchens were very small. So even the idea of how we live in kitchens today, okay, if we look at historic cabinetry, means that you're looking at 1960s, 70s, and 80s before kitchens become the cool hangout space that they are today. Realize too that in early houses, remember the 1880s Victorian in Granbury, we see from the Sanborn maps that there was a bunch of outbuildings. Those most likely were outdoor kitchens. Kitchens were a dangerous space. They didn't want fires to happen. That's where you were cooking things. And so they didn't want that part of the house. So the kitchens were even separated from houses at that time. So I remember early in my career, and I've got 1950 in here, because Sam Maloof, who used to be one of my hero furniture makers, I wanted to be Sam Maloof, made these incredible rocking chairs. When he got back from World War II, he was commissioned by the plywood companies to build things out of plywood so they could show people how to use do-it-yourselfers use plywood on their various projects and their various things. So realize that we weren't as builders even using plywood the way it's used today until you get after World War II and you get into the 50s and things like that. So when we're designing historic cabinetry, when we're designing things, we are going back to the past, and it's determining and driving a number of things. And those things are, one is the inset door, okay? The inset door means that cabinets used to be made like pieces of furniture, just like this here. There is a face frame that you can see right here. Do you see that? Right? The door sits inside the face frame, and these butt hinges are exposed, okay? Now, these hinges were oftentimes exposed hinges, right? You'd have a butterfly hinge, you had different kinds of hinges, but the hardware and the hinges were very important. They would be inset doors. What happens after World War II, okay, when Europe is being rebuilt very fast, they discovered that instead of building a door, okay, so here's the cabinet, right? And there's your drawer, and there's your door, right? They discovered that instead of, if I do a section like this, that instead of having a face frame and then the door sitting inside that, they realized that if they did these special hinges, they could have the door actually sitting on top of the face frame. What that means is that they don't have to square up this hole to line up the door exactly the way it is in that opening with a 1/8 inch reveal or 1/16 reveal, right? Look at the reveal around this door. There's a very slight reveal there, and it looks more like a piece of furniture. So they realized that they could save a bunch of time if they used a different hinge that allowed them to lay the door on top of the face frame, and they could speed up production. It's called the European hinge, okay, because it was invented in Europe. So kitchen cabinets today, the number one thing I'm saying is have inset doors. Two, I don't like the little pegs, okay? And basically what happens in production building is if they had the side of a cabinet, okay, let's just say the side of this cabinet inside there, and this is it. They would have to drill all these little holes here, okay, in order to get the pegs to hold the shelves, okay, in an adjustable shelf. Well, what they do, if you go into production cabinet shops, they have machines that basically have all these drills coming down, all compartmentalized so that they can basically put a sheet under there and go zip, turn it around, zip, and they've got all their holes paid. They've got into a production mindset. So what we've done is we've actually gone back to an early 1920s catalog and realized that inside these cabinets, I've got two sides where I've got this U, and there's a little cleat that sits inside here that goes right in here, and it supports the shelf. We realize that this is a much stronger, safer, better way of having shelves held into a cabinet. So that's our shelf stay. That's the way we build the cabinets so that they have this old-timey look. The last thing is you'll see that same bookcase back there. The back of that bookcase basically has all these boards in it, okay? Before plywood, before you could just take a big sheet and pin it back to there, you actually had to take individual boards like an old piece of furniture, and they were tongue and grooved together. So those boards sat together, and that was basically how you sheathed the thing. Oh, and look what's in here, okay? Tongue and groove boards with a bead, okay? So that is what they were doing. That was how they were doing it kind of pre-plywood. So plywood ends up driving so much of this thing. We also have a 1-inch door on the face of ours. We haven't gone down to a 3/4 inch door. We think that beefier door ends up looking more like a furniture quality. That's why we're trying to, when we build cabinets, are trying to do kind of furniture grade, furniture quality material so that it works and it all goes together. That historic design is what inspires us. If you look at our Drayton Hall inspired house, there's a lot of traditional cabinetry in the dining room. There's a mantle with two kind of china hutches on either side. The olive hardware hinges that we're using inside there, the glass, the way it's decorated, the way it's proportioned, right? And if you go into the kitchen, it's a very traditional kitchen. All of those things are looking to the past, looking at those architectural traditions, and using those to help us design better, to help us build better, to help us have more beautiful cabinetry inside our houses. As we look back in this area, not much here, a huge explosion of millwork there, and colonnades and built-ins with high quality woods like oak and other things, great architectural details like dentils you'd see in here, all because those were showy pieces of furniture. That's what cabinets were in the turn of the century, and we don't really have modular cabinets until the 1920s. Great Depression comes along, really blows up the whole industry, and cabinets really change. And cabinet makers are looking for a faster, quicker, cheaper way of building, and that continues all the way today. Now, there are some don'ts, okay? I don't like overlay doors, okay? I don't like MDF, okay? MDF is medium density fiberboard. It's basically sawdust, okay? And so your carcass for your kitchen cabinet, I don't want it made out of MDF, because what they'll say is, well, we're gonna do your face frame, okay, out of hardwood or something solid, but all the backside of your carcass is gonna be made from MDF. And if you look at the cheap furniture, IKEA, just chipboard, you look at all these different things, they're using the cheapest things. It's not even plywood anymore. Plywood implies plies of wood put together. MDF is sawdust with a veneer. Chipboard is chipboard with a veneer. Those are materials that will not last for 100 years. They're things that are not generational things that you're gonna pass down and pass on. So a bunch of different things that we can learn and do, a bunch of different things that will make our cabinets better, all by looking to the past. Having got into the design things and how you could look at a Victorian or an arts and craft or a period revival house and see it in the cabinetry, that's even sexier. Getting historic cabinetry is a huge detail, okay? It is one of the most defining architectural elements in a home. So be sure to look for those things. Be sure to design with those things, because that can make a huge difference. Let me know what questions you have. I'm Brent Hull. Thanks for watching.